So after spending the best part of 2 hours bored out of our minds watching the Monaco Grand Prix, F1 was finally back in Canada, with Sergio Perez and Kevin Magnussen's cars surprisingly making it to Montreal as well, having been smashed into a million tiny pieces last time out. As I mentioned though, this time we were in Canada for round 9 of the season, a track that usually delivers some great sporting action, something that other professional sports in Montreal aren't really too good at. But with another round of F1 does mean another round of predictions from myself and, more importantly, Enzo the dog. So let's find out where he put everyone for round 9 as we get into mine and Enzo's predictions for the 2024 Canadian Grand Prix. Starting off then with my qualifying GOAT, and the person I've gone with here is Fernando Alonso. Now don't get me wrong, last time out wasn't great, and nor was the time before. However, getting back to a track like Canada, which is pretty standard on the calendar, I feel like Alonso's going to excel. He did really well here last year, and I'm pretty sure the year before that, and I feel like this is one where he can turn that around. Ultimately for Alonso, I feel like getting into Q3 and maybe pushing up towards 8th place, 7th place would do this prediction justice. Next up then we get to my qualifying fail. Now last time in Monaco I chose Sergio Perez, and this time in Canada I'm also choosing Sergio Perez. Now last time in Monaco he qualified in 18th place, and I feel like having now signed his 2-year extension with Red Bull, there isn't that pressure on him to perform, not that he was doing so anyway. However, with Sergio I feel like we're sort of seeing what happened last year. He starts off well and then it all just kind of collapses. And so for qualifying especially, I feel like it could go wrong for him. Next up, moving then to my sneaky good driver, and the person I've gone for here is Yuki Tsunoda. Now Yuki's been solid all year, and I feel like putting him in the sneaky good category probably summarises his season as a whole, if not it's a little bit of an understatement. So I feel like in Canada this is one where he could really build on his success that he had in Monaco, and generally the success he's been having this year. Enough for driver of the day, probably not given those top tier drivers and teams, but for Yuki I feel like sneaky good is a pretty solid bet for him. Next up then we move to sneaky bad, and I'm going to go with Zhou Guanyu. In Monaco, Sauber were absolutely nowhere, and I feel like the longer this season goes on, the closer we get to Audi taking over, I feel like that Sauber team is just generally going to fall further backwards, and so I feel like for Zhou finishing maybe even in last place isn't too far of a stretch. Ultimately I feel like it's more probably on the car than him, however if you look at that backpack of say Sargent and Saubers, maybe chuck in Lance Stroll most likely, and I feel like in Canada he may just end up at the back of them. Moving then to my driver of the day, and I'm going to go with Charles Leclerc. Now he won last time out in Monaco, great result, great performance. This time in Canada I don't think he'll get the win, stay tuned to see who I have put in that number 1 slot. However for Charles I do feel like he can continue that momentum, and Ferrari's car is definitely looking much better than it did in the first couple of races. And he's not that far behind Verstappen in the standings, and Ferrari definitely aren't that far behind Red Bull in the constructors either. I feel like Charles is someone who's really going to turn it on now. So for Canada, I've got him as my driver of the day. Then getting on to my flop/fail of the day, and the person I've gone for here is Daniel Ricciardo. This kind of ties into the Sergio Perez contract, and I feel like now that Sergio has signed, that goal of Ricciardo getting back into the Red Bull team, the fact that it's a 2-year deal, just makes me feel like Ricciardo's probably going to lose a little bit of confidence, and to be fair, the season wasn't going that great anyway. In Canada, a lot of different things can happen in the race, can often be quite chaotic, and the weather can get involved, and I feel like Ricciardo, for some reason, this just isn't going to work out great for him. And then finally we get to my podium. Now in 3rd place, I've gone with Lando Norris. He was beaten by his teammate last time out, but I feel like 2 races in a row, that's probably unlikely. However, do I think he's going to be up there with a Verstappen, with a Leclerc who won last time? Not quite. I feel like it'll be closer than it's been most of the season, but it's going to be Norris in P3. Then in 2nd place, as I mentioned, it's not going to be Leclerc for the win, instead he's in P2. I would expect a solid drive for him, the Ferrari car's looking good, Charles is looking good as well. But in P1, my race winner is Max Verstappen. I feel like him losing 2 races in a row is just kind of unlikely. Plus Canada, it's not the easiest to get past, and so I feel like if Max can get into the lead, he would most definitely hold it from there. Moving on then into Enzo's predictions, and of course first off, let's see how we did last time out in Monaco. And as you can see, I was completely destroyed. This is in fact the biggest margin of victory for any round that we've had this year, 22-8. That means that in the season standings, I'm now up 5-3 as Enzo closes that gap up to just 2 points. Getting into his predictions for Canada then, and with all 20 drivers on the table, it appears he's going for a Williams first off, and it's going to be Logan Sargent he's slotting into that P20 position. Moving on to 19th, and it appears that Enzo's not predicting a very good weekend for Williams in general, as 19th place is going to go to Alex Albon, as he's slotting in the Thai driver to 19th. Moving on then to 18th place, and whereas a normal person might put someone like a Bottas or a Hülkenberg, a Magnussen, a Zhou, instead Enzo's taking his time and deliberating, and the person he's actually going for here is Sergio Perez, clearly not expecting that new Red Bull contract to influence Sergio's form. Moving on then to P17, and Enzo's going for one of the bottom row drivers, and it's going to be one of the Saubers, Valtteri Bottas in 17th. To be fair, it's a pretty reasonable prediction, the Saubers aren't looking great, and 17th may even be considered a good performance. Moving to P16, and it's going to be the first of the Haas drivers, as Enzo's going to pick up car number 27, Nico Hülkenberg. Could it be that down in 16th, Nico's going to play the smash into every car role that Kevin Magnussen has played? Well, we'll have to wait and see. Getting into 15th place then, and after picking his teammate 2 places ago, he's going to go for the other Sauber of Zhou Guanyu. Again, 15th and 17th place for Sauber would be a pretty high finish, I reckon. Moving on then to 14th, and it appears Enzo's going to go for one of the AlphaTauris, Visa Cash App, buy one get one free, as James Vowles would say, and he's gone with Daniel Ricciardo, slotting in the driver with no more Red Bull first team contracts into 14th place. Moving on then to 13th, and we get to Alpine, and it appears that the driver Enzo's going to be going for here is Pierre Gasly. Obviously the news broke this week that his teammate Esteban Ocon will be leaving the team, however for Enzo it appears that's going to be the wrong decision, as Pierre Gasly's finishing lower between the 2 French drivers. Into 12th then, and he's going to be continuing his hatred for Fernando Alonso as he puts the Spaniard in 12th. I genuinely think Enzo's only put Alonso in the top 10 once this year. Moving into P11, and we go for the other Aston Martin, as apparently it's no points for the team. Lance Stroll's going to be slotting into 11th place, just ahead of Fernando. Getting into the top 10, and what I can only describe as a disappointing result for Lewis Hamilton, as he's the driver Enzo's going to be picking up and putting into this 10th place slot. Not much more to say than that just about sums up the season so far. Getting into P9, and we're still left with a few of those lower tier drivers, and the one that Enzo's gone for here is Yuki Tsunoda. As I've said before, Yuki's having himself a great season, and a P9 finish would only add on to that. Top 8 time now, and something quite unusual here, Enzo's going to be putting one of the Alpines, Esteban Ocon, into 8th place, clearly showing that the team are making the wrong decision by kicking him out of the door. P7 now, and we're left with 4 race winners still, and one of them is going to be going in this 7th slot, as Lando Norris gets selected by Enzo to go into P7. Pretty disappointing for him if that's where he ends up finishing. Into P6, and we're going to go with what must be one of the most unrealistic predictions Enzo has made all year. Kevin Magnussen is in 6th place. Honestly, if this happens, I'll head down to the pet store and buy Enzo every single treat they've got in there. Top 5 time now, and we're left with the 2 Ferraris, Max Verstappen, Oscar Piastri and George Russell, with George in that Mercedes being the person that Enzo's going to go for here to fit into the 5th slot. 5th is where George finished last time out in Monaco, and so another 5th place is not too unrealistic. He does have more points out of the 2 Mercedes drivers, and so finishing ahead of Hamilton, again, not too unrealistic. Into 4th place then, still the 2 Ferraris with Piastri and Verstappen, and it's Oscar Piastri that's going to be slotting into this 4th slot. After a race win for McLaren just a couple of rounds ago, it appears that P4 and P7 is the best that they can do, with Oscar dropping from P2 last time in Monaco. And then there were 3, the 2 Ferraris and Max Verstappen. Which one is it going to be? It looks like it could be a Ferrari, and it's going to be Carlos Sainz that Enzo decides to put into this 3rd slot. I think as the season's gone on, we have seen Sainz slowly just fall behind Leclerc in terms of race pace, qualifying, etc. And I feel like this could continue in Canada, and so Enzo putting him behind his teammate isn't the most unrealistic prediction. That of course means that there's just 2 drivers remaining, and it's the top 2 in the standings. Now last time out, Enzo went with Leclerc in 2nd, but will he do it again? No, he's gone for Max Verstappen this time, as it appears Red Bull's winless streak is going to stretch to 2 races. At the start of the year, if you asked me to put anyone else in 1st place other than Max, I think you'd have been having a laugh. However, after the last few races and what we've kind of been seeing from the pace of the cars, I wouldn't be overly surprised. And that of course means there's only 1 driver left to be selected, as following on from his win in Monaco, according to Enzo it's going to be back-to-back wins for Charles Leclerc and Ferrari. So there you have the predictions for the Canadian Grand Prix. Enzo's are on the left, mine are on the right. Let me know yours down in the comments below and where you think we've gone wrong and what we could have done better. But anyways, that's all for now. Thank you very much for watching. I do hope you have enjoyed it. If you have, make sure to give the video a thumbs up. It really helps it out. And get yourself subscribed to the channel so you don't miss any more of the content this year. But until next time, take care.